Okay, so yesterday in Colab 1, we went over the emotion recognition dataset from Kaggle, which contains recordings from um, the participants that played emotionally different computer games: boring, calm, horror, and funny. These were EEG signals, and we analyzed data from one of the participants, participant 01, and we found out that the AI was pretty good in helping us structure the analysis, meaning it went over all the four stages, and we were able to obtain the data, we were able to analyze the data, visualize the results, and report the results. So all the four stages were there. However, the results themselves were um, pretty bad. We saw large standard errors, and we talked about why that what was the possible what the possible reason for that was. So we really saw that the AI can help us structure um, the workflow, but not our thinking. And then we specifically focused on the principles of workflow construction with AI. And let me repeat them because these are um, possibly the most important thing that you can address when working with AI when programming workflows. So these principles are, the first one is exactness in terms of prompt creation. So we have to try to be as exact as possible when writing AI prompts without leaving too much volition to the AI. Because if we are ambiguous, say in specifying the exact parameters for data generation, the exact analysis methods, or something else, the AI will make a decision and it will do it for us, but the result will probably not be reproducible. Meaning, if you reprompt the AI, then it will come up with a different solution. And more importantly, the solution that comes up with might not be what we want. It might not correspond to our experimental design. So we have to try to be as exact as possible to the extent of achieving our goal. We have to the second um, idea here to mention is that we have to carefully validate what the AI's output, at least in terms of the comments it leaves. Because typically the AIs tend to produce over-explained codes to make you, well, we call it to make you feel better, so that so that you fully understand what's going on in that code. And it leaves long comments explaining its logic. And it's a good idea to go over at least the header comments and checking what it actually did. Because yesterday we saw that sometimes it forgets including um, reproducibility statements, so it does not fix randomness parameters, and well, that'll affect the further experiments down the line. And we also saw, I think it was in Colab 1, or maybe in one of the pre-workshop notebooks, that sometimes AI includes statements that we did not ask for to make the examples more educational than realistic. It was in one of the classifier examples where it intentionally generated data to be more easily separable than what we asked it to. And the results were artificially inflated because of that. So it's just a good idea to go over at least the header comments and check what the AI generated. The third principle is modularity. It's a good idea to specifically ask AI to generate modular code separating individual stages of your workflow. In terms of our 4 steps, it's a good idea to ask it to generate one module for data acquisition, one module for data analysis, uh, one module for visualization, and a module for reporting results. Of course, you can split these modules further and have submodules, but modular logic is best because because of 2 reasons. The first one is this over um, explanation. AI tends to produce these long chunks of code that are very hard to track, and it includes lots of comments, and it is just very hard to go over them and read them and debug them later. And the second reason is ease of flexibility. If you are programming or if you are prompting AI to produce modular code and you would like to replace one of the modules down the line, um, if the modules are truly independent from each other, then it's easy to do. You just swap one module with another, and you don't have to change anything in other modules. But in these huge chunks of code that the AI tends to produce, if you change some parameter somewhere in the middle, then possibly other parameters down the line will also be affected. And you have to go and change them manually. So that's just an additional headache uh, we preferably would like to avoid. So it's a good idea to try to prompt the AI to generate modular code, specifically instructing it to create independent modules. I think these 3 principles summarize the main ideas that we talked about yesterday, and we will continue using them today. So in Colab 1, we worked with this data set and we analyzed one participant. In Colab 2, we are going to analyze multiple participants. We will try uh, we will try to do it in Google Colab. However, if you attended the sessions on Fabric yesterday, then you're fully free to try running that notebook on Fabric or on your own HPC. Because, well, as we discussed yesterday, a notebook is just a file, and you can upload it to Fabric or to your own HPC and process um, the notebook there. We will look at the caveats um, that might arise when we work with notebooks when we process when we try parallel processing of large data sets, and we will try to address them. It might be the case that the AI just figures it out on itself and it'll be a smooth ride. But when I was testing the Colab 2, it didn't do everything properly, and I had to reprompt it multiple times to fix the error. So let's see what happens today. Maybe it'll come up with the correct solution right away. Maybe it doesn't. We'll see. Okay, so we are working with lab stage 2, and just to re-emphasize again, when we open collabs from public sources that are stored on GitHub, the changes are not saved. So if we make any changes here, they will not be saved. And to save the changes, you either have to download the notebook, download .ipynb, which will physically download the notebook to your local machine after you make your changes, or you have to make a copy in Drive. It'll create a copy of this notebook in your Google Drive, and your changes will be saved. Let me do that so that we have full control over our changes. Okay, let me connect to the environment. Let me make the window a little bit smaller. All right. Okay, so we will follow the same pipeline: data acquisition, um, data analysis, which in our case will be training a machine learning model, visualizing the results, and documenting the research. And here, the challenge in this notebook compared to the previous notebook is that most of the prompts are not explicitly stated. So we will have to think about um, how to construct these prompts and see if our potential construction achieves what we want. Yes, so if you run this on Fabric, we give instructions on what the set of actions to perform to set it up. If you're running it on your local HPC, then you would probably follow the same steps because they're pretty standard. In Google Colab, they're already done. So the required packages are already installed and the environment is already set up. So we can just go ahead and um, execute the cells. The full data set contains 828 subjects, and we have a cell below that downloads the uh, the data set from Kaggle. Kaggle is the platform that stores the data set. So we provide this code, but if we didn't, if we just found that data set and didn't know how to download it, then we would just prompt AI and it would tell us. Basically, this chunk of code was also provided by the AI um, with just some minor modifications with the actual link to the data set and the actual name of the data set. So if we execute the cell in Google Colab, it will download the data set to the local Colab storage. And yesterday, okay, it's not being displayed here, I think. Let me just double check. Might be. Yes. So yesterday we saw that the Colab environment provides a file browser, and when you download something in Colab, it temporarily stores it inside this file browser, and you can find the downloaded dataset under this path. So it's Kaggle input emotion recognition, and we can see it in the file browser. I think I just saw Kaggle. Yes, Kaggle input emotion recognition, and here's our dataset. Just to remind ourselves what the dataset looks like. So it has really nice structure, which is not typical of such datasets, but here they really tried to make it look good. So let me reload this page so that um, we can take a look at it. Okay, it's not rendering for me very well, so let us look at it in Colab. Or maybe no. Yeah, so typically there would be a drop down button here, and you can look at the dataset structure, but my window is too small probably for it because of the zoom controls, so I cannot view it here. So let us take a look at the dataset structure in Colab itself in our file browser. So we have our database for emotion recognition, and then we have participants' data stored in um, folders. And each folder name, the name of each folder corresponds to the name of the participant. And so for participant O1, for example, and for every other participant, we have three folders: pre-processed EEG data, raw EEG data, and then the participant ratings, which were a part of their behavioral response. We are going to work with pre-processed data, but since raw data is provided in your projects, if you would like to work with this particular data set, you can re-process it as you see fit. And so pre-processed data, okay, maybe we reached the end of the drop-down level, but pre-processed data contains two files, the MATLAB files with raw data and, with data, and the CSV files with data. Let me actually try to reopen it here. Um, Maybe if I change it to here. No. Okay, well, it's not cooperating. This is fine. But yes, yesterday we took a look at it and we saw that each data set, um, each folder contains two files, the CSV file with the data and the MATLAB file with the data. So you can process this in both Kaggle, in both Python and R, or in MATLAB. Not sure why it's not cooperating today, but these things happen. Okay, so first, the first prompt challenge is the subject's variable below should hold subject identifiers from the dataset, so from SO1 to S28, and we need to design a prompt and define this variable with the AI. I think I'll give you just a minute or a couple of minutes to do that. So the way we're going to work with these notebooks is I'm going to stop at these prompt challenges so that if you follow along, you can have time to try prompting. But I highly encourage you to not wait for me and just follow along at your own pace, and just maybe keep the video in the background, as I mentioned, some details or insights. But you don't have to wait for me. You can just go ahead and complete as much as possible. And once we reach there, um, well, that will work from there. So while you're doing that, let me try to fix this dataset structure. Okay, so yes, it is my browser. So if I open the same dataset page in Chrome, we can see that here, this is the drop-down menu I was talking about. So the data set has folders for each subject, and each folder has preprocessed data, raw data, and behavioral responses. And then in the preprocessed data, it has files. Yes, it has two folders, not files. One folder contains files in the CSV format, and one folder contains files in the MAT format. And so each CSV or MAT file corresponds to one game. The games are listed as boring, calm, horror, and funny. And each file contains recordings from the electrodes, from the EEG electrodes, and each recording is about 5 minutes long. So these are the raw files we are working with. Let me switch back to my other browser. Okay, so we need to design a prompt and define the variable with the AI. So the subject's variable should hold subject identifiers from the data set. I would prompt it with something like, I have a data set of subject IDs ranging from S01 to S28. Generate a list with subject IDs as strings. Great. So now it generated a list of subject IDs encoded as string variables, but we also want to put this list inside the subject's variable. So let us just say put this list into the subjects variable, and then it generated the variable called subjects with all the subject IDs. I would say from experience, this is one of the best moments in using the AI to generate these long lists of strings. Uh, I guess everybody has their own way of doing that. I used to do it via Excel, just or maybe with loops. But with the AI, sometimes it's just easier and quicker to prompt the AI to generate the list of identifiers if we want them in this explicit format and then edit it. But to each their own. Okay, and so we have our list with our subjects, our subject IDs rather. Then we have a set of functions. The functions below read data from single subjects and combine the resultant data sets into an array of size subjects by gain types, by channels, by time. We already looked at these at these functions yesterday when we were designing um, the, the data acquisition function for a single subject. This function is almost the same. So yesterday we read the file, we found that there was a column with all nans named unnamed 14, which we dropped. And here we also drop it. And then we just read all the subjects in a loop and concatenate all of their data in one large long data frame. And then we restructure it in this format. These functions were also generated with AI. Uh, we have them here just for the convenience because we obviously have to change the variable names to match our data set. So just for the sake of convenience, we already have these functions implemented, but we can also prompt the AI to generate these functions and then adjust smaller details here um, specific to our data set. So let's try running these two functions. Oh, one important thing here is that note that these are functions, so these are not chunks of code um, written in a script format. So we are fully committing to our modularity idea here so that we have a function for reading subjects. If we are to change something down the line and we want to change the way we read subjects, we can just replace this read subjects function with another one without affecting further steps. So let us try executing this. It takes some time because I think the data set is 2 point something gigabytes, 2.4 gigabytes. Yes, we download the data from Slack and we add it to Colab. We do it by executing this cell here with this cell here, and it will automatically download the data and put it in our Colab temporary storage. So we were trying to read subjects, but we saw that the function throws an error. And this is what an error looks like in Colab. It outputs a chunk of code that could have potentially caused that error. It's not always accurate, but often it is. And then it gives us a brief description of the error. So it says it's a file not found error, and it says that there's no such file or directory, and it lists which directory is missing, file or directory is missing. So we can see that this is the full path for our data set. Subject 26 here does not have the CSV file that we are looking for. In this sense, um, Python errors are, at least they're trying to be as explicit as possible. And here it's clear that something's wrong with one subject. So we can go ahead and just confirm that indeed subject 26 maybe is missing some data. So, oh, I'll have to go back to Chrome for that. Let me do that. So if we look at the data for subject 26, we are trying to read their preprocessed EEG, and we can see that they only have the .mat format files, and the function there tries to read the CSV file, as we did yesterday. So subject 26 throws an error, and the processing stops. This is a nice example of what we discussed yesterday in one of the pre-workshop notebooks, that if a situation like this may occur, then it's best to include some safeguard rails to still continue processing so that one subject does not drop your whole processing routine. This is because, especially if you process some heavy data sets like fMRI data sets, or if you have 500 subjects and then say subject 285 throws an error while you're processing overnight, then the rest of the subjects will just halt and you will lose valuable time. So we have to add some guardrail or somehow we have to somehow address situations like this. We didn't know beforehand that this data set would have such a problem, but if we are to suspect that, uh, a good idea would be to add a guardrail along the lines we discussed yesterday. Let us go back to Colab and let us see what the challenge suggests. So as we can see, there's an error when reading data from one of the subjects, and we need to design a prompt to list the contents of the subject's directory and compare the contents with another subject to identify the problem. Well, we did it visually, but then a good challenge is to try to prompt AI to check the subject directory and to see what's going on here. This is especially relevant for when we're working, say, in a terminal-based environment on an HPC cluster, for example, on Fabric, where we don't always have a graphical user interface, and we are not always sure what the exact subject folder locations are. And so it might be just a good idea to do it via the terminal. So to enter some codes or commands to display what might be going on. So let us try to design such a prompt. So we are actually, in this case, we can just copy this text and slightly modify it to achieve our needs. So we can say that there is an error when reading data of one of the subjects. We need a prompt to list the contents of the subject's directory and compare with another subject. So here we have to use our exactness principle and specify exactly what is wrong. So we can, for example, give the just copy paste the error to the AI and say there is an error when reading data from one of the subjects, and give it the error, just the whole error description. And then we can ask it to list the contents of the subject's directory and compare. Um, so we can say, give us a command to list the contents of the subject's directory and compare the contents with another subject, for example, subject SO1. Let us try that. Okay, so it produced us, so it produced a huge chunk of code. Yesterday we discussed that typically we don't like huge chunks of codes, but as a debug tool, it might be okay. So let us copy paste it and see if it addresses the problem. So it lists the contents of the subject 26 directory. So let's see it here. We can see that it just lists all the folders that subject has. So inside inside the folder named S26, there is a .mat folder, and inside this .mat folder there are these format files, as we saw on Kaggle, and inside the what is it called, SAM ratings folder, there are the behavioral response files. And then if we compare that with subject O1, if we compare that with subject O1, subject O1 will have the mat folder, the CSV folder, and the ratings folder. So interestingly, here, so here it lists the preprocessed data, the raw data, and well, that's it. So it lists all the contents of all the folders inside the subject folders. So interestingly, we can see that the for subject 26, the raw data, the raw EEG data folder has both files in both formats, in .mat and .csv. But the preprocessed data folder only has the .mat folder, so the CSV did not make it to the preprocessed folder, which occurs. And if we are to preprocess the data ourselves, we would probably have access to the preprocessed data for that subject. But it's just a good way to identify it. So one problem, of course, with all this is that you can see that I have to scroll around and try to identify what's going on. So let's just, out of curiosity, ask it, um, make a simpler, more readable output. Let us try this version that it generated. Yes, this is much better. Um, it just lists the summary folders of the directories for each subject, and it specifically focuses on the pre-processed data. So it's figured out that the problem is most probably in the pre-processed EEG data folder, and it lists the contents only of the pre-processed EEG data folder. And here we can clearly see that the CSV format folder is missing. And I mean, this solution is much nicer because it's just shorter and and the output is much cleaner. So again, re-emphasizing that idea that we talked about yesterday, if the AI produces long chunks of over-explained and over-detailed codes, it might be a good idea to reprompt it to ask for a shorter solution, because by default, the AI will try to explain everything it does, leave a lot of comments, make codes maybe less efficient, but um, very, very detailed. And then it can get, in doing so, it can get even more confusing. So it might be a good idea to continuously reprompt it for simpler solutions. And here it worked for us nicely. Okay, so now we want to prompt the AI to modify the list of subjects to exclude subject 26, but still include subjects 1 to 25 and 27 to 28. Yes, based on the exactness principle, we specifically copy pasted the error because we would like ideally to specify the error, and then the AI can figure out the, the solution itself. So my exact prompt here was there was an error when reading data of one of the subjects, the error itself, and then we asked for a command to list the contents of that directory for that subject versus some other subject, such as subject SO1. Okay. All right. So we are to modify the list of subjects to exclude subject 26, but still include subjects 1 to 25 and 27 to 28. Oh, yes, of course. So the next challenge that we are going to address is, I mean, the prompt is also hidden in the definition of the prompt. So we will just use what we want to do to generate to adjust the list of subjects. Um, while we're here, yes, should you have any questions, just feel free to post them in the chat. Um, I think also a good point to address here is, especially in more standardized non-analysis related tasks, such as say going over your file system or locating files or um, well, yes, mostly when when working with files. There are tons of solutions on how to do that. Uh, Basically, that's because of how operating systems work. And so the AI, if you continuously reprompt the AI, it might generate different prompts. So you just need to be prepared for that, that the codes you see might change as you continuously reprompt it because there are so many ways to do that. So as long as the final result is okay, um, it should be fine. Yes, we still use the preprocessed data. So subject 26 throws an error for our preprocessed data. And well, there are two ways to address that. Either use the raw data everywhere and preprocess it ourselves, or to just drop subject 26 and go with the other subjects. We're using the second solution here. Not the best one, of course, but just to save time. And well, alternatively, we could go back and reprocess their data. Okay, so let us modify the list of subjects to exclude subject 26. Or we can just say that. So um, we have the subjects defined here in this prompt window, so it's aware of our subjects variable. So we can just ask it to modify the list of subjects to include subjects 1 to 25 and 27 to 28. As you can see, it dropped subject 26 which was problematic. And now we can just copy and redefine this list. And here we again call our read subject function. And let's see if it works now on the modified list. It isn't. Let us see. Let us see what's going on then. So as you can see, we're still having this problem that there's still a problem with reading some files. So something is still not right. So let us see what's going on. The subject that threw that error is definitely dropped, so this is fine. That means that there is something wrong with our read data function. So let us try to fix it with the AI. To fix that with the AI, what I would do is I would copy paste our read data functions from above. And I can say, here are my functions to read data. So I just copy paste those functions. And then I can say that I'm running this piece of code that throws an error. I am running this piece of code on on this list of subjects. And then we can just say it throws, and then we copy paste the error. So basically, we just give the AI a little bit more information and see if it can fix either the function or the list or tell us in general what's going on with our reading function. And then I can say, why is that? Okay, so it analyzed the error and it says that the problem is not our subjects list. And well, we can visually verify that yes, the subject 26 is now excluded. So the problem is the variable path is already pointing inside subject 26. Okay, so it says that the problem is within the read subjects, and then it suggests a fix. So we need to make sure that the path points to the overall directory, not to a particular subject's directory. So the problem is with the overall path. Let us see what's going on with our path variable. It's specified here. Mm-hmm. So, okay, the AI pointed us towards the problem. It says that the problem is with the path variable. We need to make sure that the path points to the correct directory, because otherwise it cannot read. So the correct directory is the top directory that contains all the subject's data. If we go back to the notebook to the very top, you can see that we define this path variable here in the very top cell. And it indeed points to this top directory, game EMO. But then an interesting thing happened, and that thing happens pretty regularly. And that's another thing you need to be careful with when you work with AI, especially when it produces those script-like code chunks. So you can see here in the codes that we generated, there probably is another variable named path right here. So it redefined the path variable, and now the path variable points to a totally different directory. It worked inside the AI-generated script because it's self-contained, but it modified our global variable and it broke our read data function. Well, that's why we have that error now. So we had to do this little detective work to find out this problem, but it's a good educational point because the AI does not care about the names of the variables as long as they're consistent within one output or within prompt window. So situations like that may happen. It may overwrite some other variables within your notebook. So you would have to go back and redefine them to their proper values, which is fine. One solution to that is, again, ensuring modularity, because you can see that, again, here, it didn't try to modularize this read function, um, or I guess this function for checking the subjects. It didn't put it inside its own function. It just generated a blob that exists in the global scope of the notebook, and it modified our path variable. Um, this is another reason for why it is better to force it to generate functions and then call functions, because functions are self-contained and they do not modify variables outside themselves. So, well, unless you instruct them to. So uh, this is the reason. This is the reason for why it didn't work. Our path variable was modified. So if our suspicion is correct, and we go back to our original definition of the path variable, then everything should be all right. So let us try that. To redefine our path variable, I can just rerun this code cell that defines the path variable. This is because of the interactive nature of the notebook and Google Colab. You can see that there are these tiny numbers in square brackets next to cells. These indicate the order in which the cell was run. So this cell was run first, this one was run second, this one was run third, so and so on. And so if I now rerun this cell, you can see that it changes to 10. So this cell was 10th in our order, and it got rerun. And so now if I re-execute it again, you can see it changes to 11, and again to 12. So you can go back and rerun previous cells, and you can track which cells were run in which order by checking these numbers next to the cells themselves. But now our path variable is redefined. Um, and it should work now. Let's see, another fun error. The read subjects function was an array and got redefined as a tuple. Oh, yes, redefined it on the fly and it worked. Yes, all kinds of errors might arise. So we always need to be prepared to do some little detective work to identify what might be going on, to reprompt AI, to copy paste errors, and then hopefully come to a solution. Okay, so let us try rerunning now this cell. Now it's not throwing any errors for now. So hopefully it'll finish running. And nice, we are done with that. So it produced the data variable, and its shape is number of subjects by number of game types by number of channels by time. So we have 27 subjects because we dropped one of them. We have 4 game types. We have 14 channels per subject, and we have 38,000 time points. All right, now we move forward to module 2, which is our analysis module. The previous module was data acquisition, and essentially it came down to this line. This is the line that produces our data set. And now we are analyzing it and we are training an ML model. Let's see, we're going to train a convolutional neural network. Um, if you're unsure what a convolutional neural network is, I would recommend prompting the AI. We discussed yesterday that it's very good at explaining these topics with small examples that help us better understand what's going on. And we are to predict the game type from the temporal data across channels of all available subjects. Okay, so to put it simply, we want some advanced classifier. Um, Here, the classifier is a deep learning model called the CNN. And we want this classifier to predict game type from the temporal data of channels of all subjects. So it'll go over the time domain and the spatial domain, the channel domain. It'll perform some computations over those 2 domains. And after it's done, it'll output some prediction for what game type it was. Let us see how we can do this. So we have a prompt challenge to set up such a model. Let us look at the prompt. We are working with a data set of the specified size, and the data are currently stored as a NumPy array because this is the output of the read subjects function. So we are to write PyTorch code that trains a simple CNN on that data to predict the condition. That is the multi-class classification over 4 classes. We have to treat each subject and condition as a separate sample and make the CNN layers 1D to convolve over time. The first layer should take 14 channels, and we have to leave 3 subjects out for validation, and that's some one-time testing step. And we are to track loss and training accuracy for plotting. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on here. So let me just briefly go over it sentence by sentence to make some comments. This is actually a pretty good prompt because it's extremely exact, and the chance that it'll generate um, the successful code blob is high. It might still throw some errors, but since it's so exactly specified, we're greatly increasing our chances of getting a working solution right away. So let's see. First of all, we specify that our data set has this shape and the format in which it's stored. We specify which library we want to use, the PyTorch library, for training that model. This assumes that we have prior knowledge that this model exists in this specific library. This knowledge can come from initial analysis and prompting of the AI on um, the which models can be used with this specific data set. We're telling it that we want to predict a condition, and we are even specifying what exact problem, what exact mathematical problem we are solving, that it's a multi-class classification over 4 classes. This can be omitted probably, but since we assume that we have that knowledge that it's a multi-class classification, we can include it here. And again, it's totally fine if we don't have some of this knowledge. For example, we might not know that we want the PyTorch library, or we might not know that it's a multi-class classification over 4 classes, or we might not know that it's called that. Um, the AI might still be able to generate codes to solve this problem. It might work. Or if it doesn't, we can go back, do some, I would say, um, I wouldn't call it a literature review, but the source review essentially, and to see which libraries can be used, which models can be used in this particular situation, which and what is the correct terminology for further prompting of the AI. This strategy actually really helps me in my own research because I am typically dealing with deep learning analysis of neural data. And depending on the data type and data properties, um, there might be models that are extremely suitable for these particular formats. And before actually working on the code, I found out that it's always a good idea to just prompt AI to find out if there are models suitable for this specific data format. Because we all have a roster of our favorite models that we know how to use, we know what to expect from them, but then there might be modifications published in some certain paper a few years back that are hard to find. And then the AI can quickly analyze the literature, the available models, and find the model that might be more suitable than the um, model you're currently working with. So then, again, assuming prior knowledge, we say that we should treat each subject and condition as a separate sample and make the CNN layers 1D. Admittedly, this um, sentence requires the knowledge of how the CNN models work and I guess what convolution is and what the deep learning is, but this can come from our prior literature and source research. So the conclusion here from this sentence is that we want to convolve over time. Then the first layer should take 14 channels, as evident from the data shape. This again requires the knowledge of what the CNN model is. We want to leave 3 subjects out for validation and train only on 24 subjects, and add some one-time testing step, that is compute accuracy across the 3 subjects. So this requires prior knowledge on train test paradigms. Here we are using leave 3 out validation. So we will, and this will be a one-shot validation. So we train on 24 subjects, we test on 3 left out subjects that we did not train on, and we record accuracy so that we can plot them later. So as you can see, the prompt is very exact, which is good, but the trade-off is that it requires a lot of prior knowledge. So a solution to that can be to start with a simpler prompt, not assuming prior knowledge, or maybe do some preliminary research on these models, and then gradually modify it, making it more and more exact along the lines we discussed yesterday, to achieve an exact prompt that can generate a proper solution. Well, let us see if it works. So as you can see, the output of the cell should look somewhat like this. I tested it a couple of days back and it produced a good solution. So let us see if it does this time. It might not. Again, the prompts are generally not reproducible, so we shall see. So it will give some explanation. We don't really care about the explanation, but we care about the code. The code is huge. Again, it over-explained everything. It made everything um, super detailed, which might be okay for now. But as you can see, we're already having performance issues. It's not rendering properly because our prompt window becomes too long with many formatting. I would say with many with many formatting styles. So it's having a hard time rendering it. But let us try this first chunk. So it separated the 2 stages into 2 chunks. This first chunk trains the model, and records everything from the model. And then the second chunk plots the recorded accuracies and losses. Let us try what it generated. Let us see first if it runs. If it does run, we'll quickly go over what it generated, because we know that sometimes it adds additional things to make us feel better, and we might not want that. So we'll go ahead and study what it did there. Okay, so looks like the training is happening. It goes, so it trained for one pass or um, with a deep learning terminology, one epoch, for the second epoch, for the third epoch, and so on. And as you can see, the training loss is going down, the accuracy is going up. So it's probably training. We'll leave it at that. We won't wait for it to train. Or as it's training, I guess, let me stop it because we won't wait for it to train for 30 passes. Um, Luckily, I landed on line 210 here. In your prompting, it will probably be different. But here we can see that it's a knob for specifying how many epochs to train for or how many passes to train for. So we can modify it to say 5 just for the sake of saving time. And let's leave it training. And while it's doing so, let us quickly validate that it indeed generated proper code for us. So it has some configuration. If we care about configuration, we can change it here, but it's nice to have it. It performed the train test split, and it left the test subjects out. Subject 25, 27, and 28 were left for testing only. It separated the data into train and test samples, which is exactly what we asked. This is good. Then it performed reshaping of the data along the lines we asked it. To fully understand what's going on here, we need to know how the model works. So we'll skip it for now, but it did the proper reshaping because we wanted it to convolve across the time dimension, and it's doing this reshaping for it to be possible. Then it performs conversion, which is needed to train the model. We don't really care about it. It performs some normalization. This is an interesting step, so we did not ask it, I think, to normalize it explicitly, but it decided to normalize the data. So let me just double check that. Did we ask it to normalize the data? Let's see. First layer with subjects. No, we did not. So we did not ask it to normalize the data, but it decided to do so anyway. This might be okay, or it might not be, depending on your experimental design. If you care about unnormalized data, then this step needs to be removed. But it's good that we're going and validating the code chunk because otherwise we would have missed that normalization step. In general, for deep learning, it's recommended to normalize data. That's why it's doing it here. But in neural research, it might not always be beneficial. So we need to be careful about that. Then it specifies more technical things, data loaders. We don't really care about it. It defines our model. Um, this is a pretty large model. And then it specifies the training parameters, training, then it trains the model, records the train losses and accuracies, and evaluates on 3 held out subjects and prints the accuracy and the loss. As you can see here, it ran for 5 epochs that we asked it to, and it recorded loss and accuracy, and the held out accuracy was 25% after um, after training for 5 epochs. Well, we have 4 conditions. We reached accuracy of 25%, which means that the model is not properly trained. It didn't learn much because it predicts as if it was a random guesser. But this is fine. That's why it probably said 30 epochs for training, because after 30 epochs, it would have probably reached better accuracy. And it suggested here a pretty large model. It has a lot of parameters, so it's expected that the resulting accuracy is low because it didn't train for long enough. Um, in my testing a couple of days ago, it produced a simpler model and it reached better accuracy over, I think, 5 to 10 epochs. Um, but yes, in this case, the model is not properly trained. If we are to wait for a little bit longer, then it would probably reach better accuracy. So now the second part of this whole thing is plotting the training curves. So we are moving into stage 3, uh, visualizing the results because the analyses are done, and we can just see if the code produces the plots. It does. So we asked it to plot the training loss and the training accuracy. As you can see here, uh, the training loss started going down, but still, it didn't have a chance to go down by much. The training accuracy overall started going up, but again, it didn't have a chance to go up by much. So we're only in the beginning of training of this model. So ideally, we would have to wait more for it to train more properly. Now, let us address some issues that we might spot here in terms of the AI-generated code. Well, issue number one is, again, it tried to modularize everything to the best extent possible, but it didn't really do that. It didn't put things into functions. It generated this huge chunk of code with essentially fake modules because they're only separated by comments. So it's like more like a long script where parts are separated with comments. So if we are to change something in one of these sections, we might need to change that everywhere down below, which is not really flexible and convenient, but well, it is what it did. So ideally, the next steps would be to ask it to put this code in its own function that will train the model and output, say, the trained model or the train accuracy and loss and the validation accuracy. The same thing can be said about our plotting routine. It just outputted a bunch of lines. It produced the required result, but it's not at all elegant and not at all flexible. So unfortunately here, it didn't try to modularize it at all. So we would have to additionally prompt it to achieve modularity. Other than that, well, it worked because our prompt was extremely exact. So it's nice. Um, so it's just minor issues about modularity. Okay, so now we are continuing with module 3 about visualizing results. And well, we are to design a prompt to plot the safe trade and validation losses and accuracies. Here, we didn't even have to do it because, well, the AI already produced it for us. It produced it in a different format. It only plots training loss and training accuracy. So now let's prompt it to plot both the train and validation loss and accuracy. Okay. We can say now let's here emphasize modularity. So we can say now, give us a function to plot the safe trained and validation losses and accuracies. And we emphasize that it's a function. It generated a function, which is good. And it shows that now we can call a function. So this is its own module, which is great. So we define the function. And let's just copy paste its call. Okay, so we have a problem because it cannot find validation losses. It cannot find validation accuracies, which probably points towards uh, the fact that it didn't save them. Let us go up and investigate. We are again in our detective mode. Just by looking over these codes, we can see that it saves train losses and train accuracies, which is nice. But then here, it only has, oops, it only has one-time evaluation. Yes, so the prompt above asked us to perform only one-time evaluation, so we don't really have the history of evaluation or, or on the validation sample, on the test sample. We have only one pass. So there are two solutions here. Either we modify the training routine here and we ask it to save to continuously test on our validation sample and also record these results, and then the function below will work. Or we can modify the function for plotting and to plot only the train accuracy and loss. But since it's already plotted, it already plotted training loss and training accuracy. That's not really interesting. So let us try to modify the training routine and specifically ask it to perform validation during training so that then we can plot both the train and validation loss and accuracy history. To do that, we can say modify the model training routine so that it so that during each pass it tests it performs validation on the validation sample and records the validation loss and accuracy, and saves them in a format suitable for plotting later. Okay. So as you can see here, it modified only part of the code that we worked with above. So starting with this line where we specify the number of passes or the number of epochs. So we just need to be cognizant about that not the whole chunk needs to be replaced and only a part of it. So let us try that. Let us see if it works. So now we go back and modify this trading part. Okay, let me check that. Yes, it modified only step 9 here, only this one. Let's try rerunning. Let's just make sure that it works. It works, but we again set it to run for 30 epochs or 30 passes. We're not going to wait for it. So let's again modify it to 5 passes. It outputs our data shape, train test subjects, um, the model, and then it starts training. And as you can see now, it outputs both train loss and accuracy and validation loss and accuracy. So during each pass, it runs through our 3 held out subjects, and it computes the accuracy on the test sample. So it's not just one final pass, but now it tests the performance on the held out sample during each training pass. And that allows us to accumulate the training and testing accuracy and loss. It's done. As you can see, the final validation accuracy was 0.33, and during our one-shot testing, it's also 0.33. So these two numbers match as they should. And now it should be able to just plot it with the function that we defined above or below. Yes, that looks great. So now we have our loss for the model training. Train loss goes down as the model trains. Validation loss stays about the same. Training accuracy goes up, and validation accuracy is also on its way up. But again, we'll need many more passes for the model to train properly. The conclusion from that is that, well, we can always go back in the same prompt window and try to modify what the AI produces to achieve to achieve different results. So here, we essentially try to modify one of the modules to make it more flexible due to the fact that these were not true modules inside functions, but inside, but between the script comments, uh, we had to do all these things with copy pasting and selecting huge chunks of code. Not really flexible and easy, but it is what it is. If these were functions, we would just be able to replace um, a function with another function and make it way easier. But this is what we're dealing with. Okay, finally, we are to document the research now. So we are to design a prompt to save the resulting train and validation losses and accuracies in a CSV file. During the session yesterday, we discussed that it is also a good idea to save the library versions, and we generated a chunk of code that does that. Here, we're only caring about saving train and validation losses and accuracies um, in a plain text file. So this is a similar task compared to what we dealt with yesterday. Well, here the prompt is again hidden in the task itself, so we can just ask it for um, give us a function to save the resulting train and validation losses and accuracies in a CSV file. I'm again prompting it to write a function specifically to ensure modularity. It wrote a function. I just copy pasted back, briefly validated that it indeed saves the histories to CSV. And here it has example usage after training. So let us just run this function it suggests. We can see that our training history is saved to traininghistory.csv. And as before, we can go back and try to find where it's actually stored. Mm, So as you can see, I'm having a hard time finding where it put this file. So let me prompt AI to ask where this file would be stored in Google Colab if I just run this safe training history. Because you can see that here there are lots of folders. So I'm not really sure in which exact folder it put this file to. So okay, let us just ask the AI, where would training history.csv be saved in Google Colab? Give the full path. Nice. So it says it should be saved in the current working directory, which is normally content training history. Let us check that it's indeed there. Here's our content. Here's our training history. Perfect. So if we are unsure, I guess this is one. This is another advantage of using Colab because these files are standardized within Colab. So if you're unsure where the file you generated is, you can just prompt the AI to find it for you, and it will display it here. So let's take a quick look at our training history. It is indeed a CSV file with entries corresponding to the accuracy values, to the loss values, and to the number of epochs. So we did it. We documented the research, or I guess the results of our analysis. Okay, so there are some additional prompt challenges which I encourage you to work on after today's session. We're not going to go over them right now. They are fairly challenging. I admittedly they are. So they might require prior knowledge with this specific terminology for training. So if you're willing to spend some time and prompt AI explaining in simple terms what these terminology is, then I would recommend going over challenges number 1 and 2, and then challenge 4 can be done without looking into these challenges 1 to 3, and challenge 5 can also be done without. So I would start with challenges number 4 and 5. They can be done directly, and then challenges 1, 2, and 3, if you're willing to spend some time um, prompting AI to give examples for these optimizers and this DCNN architecture, then that I would encourage you to do so. Okay, so we are done with this notebook. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And otherwise, we're going to move to notebook 3, which will be shorter than notebook 2 because um, well, it has simpler activities and it's a little bit more fun to play with, I would say. Okay, so for notebook 3, we are visualization step in lab 2. Yes, well, I would encourage you to actually play around with this collab on your own. I mean, with all the collabs, because it especially Colab 2. Colab 2 essentially sets a standard pipeline for deep learning analysis on neural data. And in my practice, I actually run codes like this daily with modifications. So it essentially simulates the real research problem that you're addressing. And so you will encounter real research problems that may arise when you use AI to solve this. So I would highly encourage you to just play with that. And I think once we're done with Colab 3 and after the break, I will stay in one of the breakout rooms. And should you have any questions about any of these collabs, we can take a look at them.